Thank you very much. So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the River Wye Nutrient Management Board this afternoon. I'm Councillor Elizabeth Swinglas and I chair the board. So fire and emergency evacuation for those present in the meeting. If the fire alarm sounds, please leave the building by the nearest exit. Make your way to the fire assembly point in the car park. The agenda papers and other information of this meeting are available for viewing on the Herefordshire Council website.
Yeah,
It's all right. You okay?
Just muted the participant.
Okay, good. And we're streaming the meeting live on the Herefordshire Council YouTube channel and making a recording of it. Please ensure your mobile phones and laptops and whatever are turned to silent so we don't have ringing and interruption. To remote participants, please raise your virtual hand if you need to speak. We'll try and keep an eye open for that. Okay, so agenda item number 1, apologies for absence. Apologies have been received from the following voting board members: Jamie Audsley, Liz Bickerton, Helen Dale. And apologies have also been received from regular participants Emma Guy and Mark Liddeth. Are there any other apologies of which we need to be made aware?
Chair, Tom Tibbets of Friends of Upper Wye as well.
Thank you, Tom Tibbets. Any others? Okay, that's fine. And we have some guests and new attendees today, so I'd like to welcome Dan Westbury on behalf of the Radnorshire Wildlife Trust, and also welcome guest James Marsden, who's the chair of the Wye Catchment Partnership, Gareth Dunstall, who's here from Defra, and Kat Osborne from Welsh Government. You're very welcome. We're very grateful for your attendance. Sorry, Ethan?
Hi, yeah. Can I just provide apologies for Peter Morris as well, please, from Paris County Council?
Of course you may. Thank you very much. And I would like it recorded in the minutes that we send our best wishes to Peter Morris, and hope he's feeling better, feeling well. I'm also going to make an announcement that this will be the last board meeting that my colleague Liz Doobly will be at. She's moving on to other things, and she's been utterly outstanding. Her professionalism, dedicated hard work, collaborative approach. It's not always easy, I think we'd all accept. Sometimes it's difficult, but she remains good-humoured and focused on positive outcomes. And the range and scope of all the things that she does, it boggles my mind. And yet I always think of her like the Wye swan, smoothly moving through the currents where I feel like I'm just trying not to drown. And so I can't say how much I'll miss her and how difficult it's going to be to fill a Liz Doobly-shaped gap. But I think I'd like us all to just take a moment to thank her for all that she's done to improve the river and the state of nature in Herefordshire. Thank you, Liz. And then the other thing is that, very exciting, moving on to welcoming new people on the board. I'd very much like to welcome now the voice of the river. I'd like to start by thanking all of the amazing candidates that went through this process. I didn't know what to expect when we started the journey, and I have to say the calibre of all the applicants far exceeded my wildest dreams. One thing that more than one of the candidates said was that they just wanted to help, and if not in this capacity, then in some other way, which showed a generosity of spirit and a genuine willingness to do what they can. The selection panel were inspired by all of them, and it's often said the final choice was not an easy one. In this case, that is absolutely the case. However, after the shortlisting and interview process with multiple scoring points, we made a decision, and I'm very pleased to be introducing the voice for the river today. For several meetings, we've had an empty chair and a nameplate. Today, we have a voice, and I welcome Dr. Louise Bodnar to the River Wye Nutrient Management Board. Louise.
Thank you for the introduction there, Alyssa. To introduce myself, I tell you a little of my background. I'm a zoologist. I've worked for charities and government organisations on landscape scale conservation projects for a little over 20 years. and about half of that has been spent on catchment scale river restoration projects. I have a PhD using ecological modelling to restore habitat connectivity and ecological function. And a lot of my work has been around the development of partnerships and relationships with landowners and community organisations in order to develop conservation projects. I'm here to represent the interests of the River Wye herself, which is a great honour, and I will do my best to advocate for the needs of the river and all of the species and habitats associated and dependent upon the river. I will speak for the river, but sometimes I will speak to you as the river, because I believe that electing the river to the board is about more than making the river another interest group around the table. The river isn't just one of the interests here. The river is what this board is for. And putting the river on the board begins to move us away from an anthropocentric view of the world, where nature is a resource. It reminds us that we are one species amongst many, that we are of equal value to every one of those others, and that we belong to the earth does not belong to us. And that understanding of life is normal within Indigenous cultures across the world. And a few generations ago, it was how our ancestors related to the world here. So I will gender the river when I speak of her, as is normal in many Indigenous languages, including Welsh. And I would like us to consider water and the why for a minute before we begin our meeting. Water is far older than the earth. Water is older than the star that we call the sun. Water was born in the furthest reaches of space from the dying of the first stars 12 billion years ago. And water is one of the most stable of molecules. When Earth was very young, just 300 million years old, water travelled here as icy comets and melted to create our oceans. And it was water's paradoxical nature, her fluidity and her stability that enabled life to begin. And life was very small at first, but impressively inventive. And we inherit our innovative nature from those earliest of creatures. And life diversified into all the myriad of forms that we see in fossils and around us today. And in a very real self, in a very real sense, all of those are our relatives, our family. And just like we do, they have bodies mostly composed of water. And so today, 2.4 billion years later, water is still here with us, still giving us her gifts, still enabling life. And we are all just as dependent on water as we always have been. Those 12 billion-year-old water molecules now flow as the River Wye. The River Wye that has long been thought of as the most beautiful river in the UK. The Wye Valley, the birthplace of tourism because of the beauty of the river. In Bradley's classic work, The Rivers and Streams of England, it's written just over 100 years ago, and he describes the Wye as the fairest of rivers, delightful from its source to its mouth. And he was a passionate fisherman and describes the river with great love. The Wye is a famous salmon river, all the way down till it meets the tide. The Wye is a true salmon river. Fish of every kind worth having are in the river. The Wye seems to defy a rival. The Wye is always the best of company. Sleek Hereford cattle, the most decorative of all the English breeds of cattle are everywhere across this most wooded of landscapes. And the book includes paintings by Sutton Palmer, and the plates are very beautiful. I'm happy to pass it around if anyone would like to see them. The difference between the paintings of 1909 and the riverbanks today is very striking. The beauty of the Wye inspired Shelley and Wordsworth. Lines over Tintern Abbey is still one of the most beloved poems. Because it is only in very recent years that the beauty of the Wye has diminished. It's less than 75 years, just 3 generations after the intensification of farming and the growth of our populations have begun to affect the ability of the Wye's ancient water to support life. And so now it is our responsibility. We have to use our innovative nature to develop new ways of living with the river and to create the changes that will restore the river to its former glory, so that our children's children will be just as awed by nature's beauty as Wordsworth was in the 1800s. And so as the river, I can tell you that I am very glad to be here. I am glad that you are remembering me. And as myself, I will pledge to you to use all of my passion and experience and to make great effort to work with the board and all members of the board so that together we can develop solutions that will let life thrive in the river again. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you very much, Louise, and a warm welcome. Thank you. It's lovely to see you there. Okay, notes the previous meeting. No matters of accuracy have been reported. Just to take a quick matters arising, the letter was sent to the Secretary of State as instructed. There was an intention to put planning reform working paper into this agenda, but it's got kind of squeezed out, but I'd still like to carry that forward to the next agenda, along with, I think it might be sensible to take a moment to look at policy and legislative context changes. And can we extend an invitation to MHCLG, please, to attend that board meeting? And then there's reference to the Pickering case, which, looking at the OEP response, the court has handed down its judgment in the appeal of the case of Pickering Fishery Association versus Secretary of State for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs. The gist of it being that the court confirmed the approach taken by Defra and the Environment Agencies to the preparation and approval of river basin management plans is unlawful, and that would be something again to pick up in the next agenda, maybe under legislative and policy context that we need to be aware of. Everything else is on the agenda. Is the board content that I sign those notes as a true and accurate record? Yeah, thank you. Okay, so now we have questions. Questions have been received from Nick Day, from Friends of the Lower Wye, and from Nicola Kutcher, Friends of the River Wye, published in the agenda supplement 1. So just checking whether recipients of the question want to give a verbal response or a written response. It's up to them. So the first question from Nick Day pertains to the nutrient load in the Trothy. It's a question for Natural Resources Wales. They have had the question in advance. So do we want to give a verbal response today, or do we have Anne? Who do we have from NRW? Anne. There we go. Anne Weedy.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so we got a question quite sort of late on last week, and I am struggling with some people on leave this week. So can I give a written response to that at some point after this meeting?
Okay, that's fine. If you send that also into to Ben, then you can share it to the board, so we're all on the same page, that would be
Yeah.
great. Thank you very much. Question from Nicola Kutcher, which is a question for the Nutrient Management Board, us lot here. Given the problems caused by soil runoff from maize growing in the catchment, will the Nutrient Management Board ask Defra to introduce legislation which would require all maize to be undersown, or would this be better addressed through special measures for the Wye? I gave some thought to this, and this is my initial thinking, but obviously you're welcome to decide what you like on it. We've got the rapid review of farming rules for water, the Corrie review of the Defra regulatory landscape, and the recently published review of COAP. It seemed to me that mitigating soil losses needs to fit within the existing regulatory environment and not require a separate law to be brought into statute. And it might be worth asking that farming rules for water and control of agricultural pollution regulations takes full account of the importance of soil retention and the need for this to be a pillar of good farming practice. Because it just seems odd to separate it out when in fact there are kind of quite big pieces of regulation where it kind of should sit and does sit to a degree within farming rules for water, and I think it's under consideration for control of agricultural pollution regulations in Wales. Has anyone got any further comment? Yeah, James Marsden.
Right.
Just a button.
Alyssa, thank you. I agree with you. I would add perhaps that what you've just said needs both a spatial dimension and a temporal dimension. The spatial being where maize is currently being grown and where it could be grown down the line is the temporal dimension. Because if you look at the Met Office climate projections, maybe 5, 10, 15, 20 years out, it'll be less of a problem where it really matters now, but it will have to move uphill. And that essentially continues the problem in a different place. So the regulation needs to be flexible, but as of today, and Andrew, forgive me if I got this wrong, but from memory, FIPL take up, the only 2 farms took up the undersown option in FIPL farming in protected landscapes on the English side, in the whole of the Wye Valley National Landscape in this last year. So incentive isn't working, therefore a regulatory response would appear to be needed. And I'm suggesting it has a spatial and a temporal dimension.
But the basic principle that we don't ask for a separate law holds good. Okay. We've got Georgie Hyde. Georgie, do you want to come in?
Yeah, can I just give some feedback? I think Hereford Council run a really good natural flood management programme, and under that there's been a lot of undersowing maize, which has been really popular in a lot of the catchments. And actually I think the council, we ran out of money on some of those options to undersow maize. So I think there is an appetite to undersow maize. It's obviously been in specific catchments, and it was looking to roll that out wider. And also under SFI, there is the option to undersow maize, which again has been really popular. So whether that's just been a bit of an oddity within the FIPL funding, I don't know. But on the whole, I think it is quite a popular option to undersow. I think there is an issue when you are growing wheat in that rotation, obviously because of the grass weed build-up. But sort of in areas that we see a lot of maize, most people are trying to adopt undersowing maize where they can. So I just wanted to add that. Thank you.
Thanks, Georgie. It's really helpful. Thanks. Yeah, Richard?
A couple of things, Chair. Thank you. Firstly, it should be in the farmer's interest to undersow. It is the farmer's soil. They own it. They don't want to see it go. So actually, the idea of giving people grants to do something that's in their own interest always strikes me as being a bit unnecessary. The second, so I very much support the idea we try and incorporate it into some form of regulation, and the ones we've mentioned are obviously the first port of call. But it does, whether you'll get a Wye specific requirement into national regulations is an interesting story. It does, to my mind, reinforce the need for special treatment for the Wye. And if those routes don't work, I think it just adds argument to the need for a water protection zone.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry. Is it Martin?
Martin did.
Sorry, Martin.
Yeah, and I agree with what you said in terms of the existing regulatory flaw that's there. You mentioned the review. Certainly, under Farm and Rules of Water, there's something called reasonable precautions, so it doesn't bring out a blanket restriction on undersowing. But where you see the loss of soil or high risk locations, we do have powers under the current legislation. So any information on any inappropriate locations, we would welcomely receive.
Thanks, Martin. That's really helpful. Yeah.
Because I just asking Martin, so if soil is pouring off a field onto the road, is that something you can potentially have a look at and talk to the farmer around?
Yeah, so we do get a lot of soil loss incidents onto roads, because it's not just an EA issue, it's a highways issue as well. So one thing we are doing is we are going to join up with Herefordshire Council in terms of some of the roads where they're finding persistent drain blockages or clearances, to try and understand where they're getting intel, spend a lot of money taking soil away. Like you pointed out, soil should be safeguarded. Soil loss from fields we can look at in terms of the risk, the environment, and we just need information to inform that. It doesn't mean that we would respond immediately, but what it can do is it help inform our programme of farm inspections.
Okay, right. This is just a response to one of the questions. So I don't want to get us lost in the long grass here, or any kind of herbage really. Simon, is it very essential? No. Okay, brilliant. So I'll draft something and send it around the board and see what we make of it. But mainly, I think it's about working within the existing regulations and just pointing it out. I think we'll see where we go with that. Okay, thank you for that. Another question is a question for NRW again about stubble turnip. And you want to?
Yeah, so same again. I'll provide a written response to that, and I'll send that through to Ben. So we're just struggling with leave this week.
Okay, that's fine. And then we have questions for the Environment Agency. One regarding permitting, and the other one on mapping. Martin, do you want to do that in the room or written response later?
Yeah, we'll do it as written response.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you. So that's sorry, Catherine.
Just quickly, and perhaps it could be added to written response. It would be great to hear NRW's equivalent to what Martin Quine just said, which was very interesting, around the soil runoff, impact on highways, and attention to particular risk areas, and also the support around undersowing of maize, because obviously Martin was quoting the English side of it. So perhaps, Anne, if you could add it to your written responses, that would be really helpful.
Yeah, will do.
Thank you.
Thanks, Catherine.
Yeah, there's been if you look at the review of the co-op, then soil losses are sort of definitely something considered within that, and I think it's quite a timely moment just to sort of say that we consider that to be vitally important. Yeah, thank you, Mary.
Very quickly, I think we are about to put a camera down a drain that is currently compacted with runoff, silt and soil. If the board want to see those fascinating pieces of footage, it would give you an example of how over time soil runoff has an impact on communities and on the council's finances to repair. We're currently paying for that,
Yes.
but I'm happy to share it.
Yes, yeah, I'm very well aware. I was doing that just the other day with the team, out looking at drains that were silted up. So yeah. Okay, so moving on then. Thank you all for that. We're done with questions. So agenda item number 5, which is an update from Defra on the £1 million for the River Wye. I welcome Gareth Dunstall from Defra and also Kat Osborne from Welsh Government. We're very grateful that you've made the time to come into the meeting today. And thank you for the email which has been shared with the board that sort of outlines where you're at. So Gareth, have you got any further updates or anything that you'd like to share with the board at this point?
Thanks, Chair. Thanks for that. Nice to see everyone. Thanks for having me along this afternoon. This is the first time some of you will have seen me, so I should probably introduce myself briefly first. So my name is Gareth Dunstall. I am leading policy work at Defra on the Wye. I work in the Floods and Water Directorate, and I am involved in related work on water pollution. So I'm here today, as the Chair said, to give a brief update on where we are with the research. I think it's going to mostly be me speaking. I think Kat is on the line, but I'll be taking us through the latest updates, if that's okay. We'll be aware that the research package was announced back in March by Minister Hardy and Deputy First Minister. So just a quick recap on that. Defra and Welsh Government will work with local stakeholders to develop a research programme which will gather evidence of pollution pressures in the Wye. We said, as part of that announcement, that we would work with farmers, NGOs, citizen science groups, etc., to gather data and test solutions directly, all with a view to using those findings to develop interventions which will help us tackle river pollution. That's going to be funded over a number of years, and we really want to make sure that we land this collaborative, evidence-led approach, working with groups represented by many of you here today. So it's great that I'm able to come and speak with you all. First, I want to thank everyone for their patience. While we get the research up and running, things have gone a little bit quiet on our side, but hopefully you appreciate that there's a lot to do, and we're keen to get it right. So the Chair, you did mention that I sent a brief update out. I think that was last week, about a week ago, just to give you an overview of some of the things that are happening behind the scenes. So we're working with Welsh Government colleagues. What we're doing includes some project planning. We're also doing work to look at structures and governance. So how will the research actually be put together? And also we're considering what the research scope should be. And that last bit in particular, I'm going to spend a little bit of time on as part of this update. I don't think I need to go into too much detail on the sort of project planning. We're all very familiar with what projects are, but this will be really important because there's a lot to do, and we need to make sure that the different tasks and activities are mapped out over time so that we can see what needs to happen when. That's also really important as well, because with this group and other stakeholders that we're working with, we'll need to have really good sort of milestones and a really credible sort of delivery program, just to give people confidence that, you know, work is underway and things are happening. So the project planning work will let us have a really good timetable, which we will be able to share in due course. So look out for that. In terms of the governance, this is in the note that I think is attached to the agenda, so I don't need to go into too much detail, but the idea as it stands is that we would have a working group, we would have a steering group, and we would have an advisory panel. We want to try and keep it simple where we can, so we're not trying to invent groups for the sake of inventing them, but it's important that we have a really sort of transparent process around how decisions are made. So I think getting the governance right will be an important part of that. So that's a little bit on the project side. That's a little bit on the actual governance setup. In terms of the research and what it's going to cover, thanks to everyone who has got in touch with us recently to share their ideas and to sort of outline their thinking on what the research should cover. There's no shortage of ideas, which is absolutely fantastic. And obviously people in this call have been sort of, you know, immersed in this for a long time. So it's great to see all this expertise coming forward. Again, it's crucial to getting the scope right, because that will help us get the right evidence. As we shape the research, we want to prioritise actions which focus on farm level interventions and give effect to the living labs approach, which was set out in the announcement. As everyone here will appreciate, all research decisions need to clearly demonstrate good value, and they need to correspond to wider government priorities, which for us in Defra need to link back to cleaning up our waters, boosting food security, and supporting the circular economy. I'm sure Welsh Government have similarly clear priorities, which will line up to those. Okay, so to give you an indication of where we are with the research questions, and again, these are all to be formally discussed and agreed with stakeholders. So this is just our first stab at the research scope. We'll formally agree the research scope in due course. But what I wanted to set out now was just to give you an overview of what the research might look like and how we're kind of planning on tackling it. We've broken down various potential research questions into 4 themes. The 4 themes are, the first is the impact of existing activities and other technologies. The second theme is farmer behaviours. Third theme is barriers and facilitators. And the fourth theme is overall strategy. So I'll give you a few examples of research questions which sit within each theme. Okay, first one, when we're going to look at existing activities and other technology, that might include things such, research questions such as, what is the impact of a manure management plan, which is about checking chicken litter is properly processed and removed from the catchment. It might include research questions such as, what role can technology which pelletizes organic manures play in reducing nutrient load. I could also look at things around nutrient balance and reduction planning tools. So that's sort of theme 1, examples. Theme 2, all around farmer behaviour. What role can different crop and soil management techniques play to reduce indices or improve yield? How can farmers better manage phosphorus to levels of soil and crop need? And what these practices mean for farm businesses. Third theme, barriers and facilitators, might include things such as, how is phosphorus behaving in the Wye soils, and to what extent and in what forms is it being lost to water? And the final theme, which is about overall strategy, could be questions such as, what are the optimum pathways to achieve 0 annual accrual and draw down legacy P? And how best can we monitor and benchmark nitrogen use efficiency across different farming systems? That's a brief run through of possible research questions we might want to start with. We will be sharing that list in a similar format. We will share that with the stakeholder group, and then we can start discussions in earnest around what stakeholders want the research to focus on. We will probably explore that question using the different groups I mentioned earlier. So the steering group, which will be the external stakeholders, many of the organisations here today, that will be our opportunity to work through what the research should cover. I know that there's a huge variety of things that we might want to consider, and there'll be different arguments in favour or against the various different policy questions or research questions, but we needed to start somewhere, so that's why we've put that list together. So that's where we're at, Chair. I'll stop there and see if there's any questions. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Gareth. That's very helpful, and actually, I want to thank you and the teams, both Defra and Welsh Government, for this collaborative approach which you're taking. It's very welcome. It's really lovely to be included in the conversation at this stage and to be part of the development of this thinking. So we're duly appreciative, and I thank you for that. I did draft a kind of a straw man, if you like, with help from James Marsden, Kate Speak-Adams, just to kind of try to answer some of the questions you were posing in your earlier email, which hopefully you'll have a copy of. But obviously, board members are welcome to add into that. The other thing that I'm just going to slightly put in the mix is the tiering of the working group, steering group, and the lack of sort of how can I put it, sort of bleed through between the local stakeholders and the statutory agencies and officials, that it just feels very sort of separately tiered, and I'm wondering if there's some way of creating a bleed through between those two groups so that doesn't create a tension between those layers. It's just a thought. Obviously, it's up to the governance. It's not something really that falls to us. But right, I'll pause there. Simon Evans wants to come in. Simon from WAF.
Thank you very much, Chair. Gareth, thank you very, very much for that. I've got a couple of questions, if possible, that I haven't been able to get clarity on by reading the various bits of literature. Firstly, is this going to be a predominantly English investigations looking at the problems affecting Herefordshire, or is this going to be the problems affecting the entire river system?
It's England and Wales, England and Welsh research, so it will cover both.
Thank you. The second one is one of the questions that I've got in my head that I in terms of the river, is a lot of focus is being put on legacy P and the rate at which legacy P is being lost from being built up in soils and its subsequent pathway into the water course, and whether that is a problem. We need to determine quite quickly whether that is a problem. Are we losing our legacy P mostly during the winter months when it's biologically inactive and not causing the ecological impact on the river? In which case we would look at other pathways for phosphorus to be getting into the catchment. But before we go into a massive exercise of determining legacy P, we have to determine whether that legacy P is coming out of the drains in the winter when it's biologically inactive and ending up in the sea, or if it is actually a problem. And some of the drain monitoring work was done by the EEA and Farm Herefordshire and Wye Foundation suggests that most of it is coming out in the winter, and that there is a lag on drain flow in April and May, which could be impactful. But we need to determine that before we spend a whole load of effort in trying to wind back legacy P or map the pathways of P through the water. Let's work out what the impact of that is on the river first. That's my only input into this.
That's great. Thanks, Simon. Yeah, definitely. Let's include that as we're firming up the scope. Thank you.
Thank you. Andrew McDermott, Councillor McDermott.
Good afternoon. Just reading through the report that was available about this project, I came across a lot of jargon, which I would value your opinion on. One is I've got two questions here. One is the ecological carrying capacity of the river. I'd like you to elucidate a bit about that. What do you mean by that? And secondly, you talk about you're going to deal with social resistance, stroke, culture change, etc. And I'm just wondering what sort of methodology are you likely to adopt in order to get to grips with that?
Thanks, Councillor McDermott. So just for clarity, those 2 points were made in the sort of straw man draft response that I drafted along with James Marsden and Kate Speak-Adams. It wasn't from Defra or Gareth in the first instance. So the carrying capacity of the catchment is its ability to have levels of nutrient within the flow that can be absorbed within soil and crop requirements and not impact freshwater environment. The point about societal resistance, I mean, there's a good example of this, which is that during the Rivers Conference that we did last year, we're focusing on problematic arable and potatoes. That we had a very good example of work within the potato industry to create the regenerative potato, and then as a consumer make it possible for the consumer to make a choice, an informed choice, and that gets over a societal barrier. So there are numbers of ways in which we could look at what are the societal barriers to improve practice supporting change within the sector where that's possible. So that would be that's kind of where that thinking came from. But as I say, it was not something coming from Gareth. It was from me and from James and Kate. But thank you for that. I am going to just flag with Gareth, though, that we do, of course, have a number of plans, quite big plans, both in development, as you will be more than aware, with the catchment management plan, but also the nutrient management plan coming alongside, and the need to be mindful of these plans and other plans, including carbon budget, in looking at where that research sits and how it needs to feed into the plan process, and the data and evidence gaps that might be revealed during that process. So just flagging that up as a sort of an area that you probably need to triangulate with. Okay, Mary Albright.
Thank you, Gareth. These are probably basic questions, so forgive me. You mentioned that it will take years to undertake the research project. Do you know how many years, or is that a bit tough to answer now? But also, are there going to be cut-off points within those years where you have answers and a research element has been concluded, therefore we can do something about the research?
Thanks for those questions. So exactly how many years it's going to run for, I can't say, but it's probably, I think 2 to 3 is probably about right. Okay. So multiple years, so we can compare different sort of interventions that we're testing, and we can take a longer kind of time frame to understand what the issues are. We want to make sure that there's lots of planned milestones along the way, so that we don't just have to leave it multiple years before we start to see things coming back in. So there will be regular events, regular sort of updates as we go through, so we can learn and iterate as we go. So
in your project planning then, I presume you'll kind of have expedited research projects that maybe are more important or can be done quicker, that then can inform actions going through. Otherwise we're in this perpetual loop of taking years to find another research project, and then by the time we get to the end of that, I've got a funny guess that then we'd have another research project tacked onto the end of it.
That's certainly the approach that we'd like to adopt. Yes, okay. Prioritise the research and evidence gathering, which will give us the best actionable results in good time.
And do we adopt an interim position while we're waiting for the Defra research?
Not sure.
So we've got the DWPP coming any day soon, I'm sure. And I'm worried that if we have a research project that's several years, that is another reason for a plan to be kind of published and then bookshelved.
Yeah, absolutely appreciate that. That's a good question. We want to make sure that the research is not used as a reason to sort of hold anything up or cause any delays. So we'll coordinate with colleagues in the Environment Agency and Natural England who are working on the DWPPs.
I think the board needs to make a decision that we will carry on with what we have planned already before, and the research is happening in the background, but I think we need to commit to what we've agreed so far. As in, when the DWPP comes, that's got actions within it, we will look to implement those actions.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. But I also think that this is an opportunity to, bring those plans into the focus of the work being proposed by Defra, so that if we have a data gap analysis of the plans or something that's coming through in the development of those plans, we think, oh crikey, it would be useful if we had some research to support that or to bottom that out, then this would be a really useful relationship, which doesn't define it, but it just says it allows for it to be a kind of have a logical relationship to the catchment management plan and the nutrient management plan as they develop this year. Just I make that suggestion, but certainly we can't adjust the timetables to wait for 1 or 2 years of research. The plans would have to accommodate research as it comes through, I think. Okay, so Richard, Tyler, and then Louise.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, my question is very much along the same vein of where I would have hoped that we could absorb the lessons of DWPP, the other plans which are in development, and come up with an interim, at least, action plan for Wye, and that the £1 million could fund the collation of all those actions and bringing them under one roof, as it were, because there is a danger of everything going skewy and multiple solutions, none of which get implemented. So I would very much like to see us moving towards an interim action plan under the Defra heading, and that within, well, ideally 6 months, but yeah, might be more realistic. I think probably it would be very helpful, Gareth, if you were able to lay out, probably not now, but exactly how the sequence of events is going to take place and how that will start to influence actions on the river itself.
Okay, I'm going to go to Martin Quine for a response, and then Louise.
So I know we've got DWPP further on the agenda, but I think it's probably quite relevant where we are now, and particularly you, Louise, and anyone that's not familiar with the DWPP Diffuse Water Pollution Plan. So the Environment Agency are producing a diffuse water pollution plan. So essentially, it's going to provide an update to the English evidence in terms of water quality. Okay, what that will mean is that we are currently going through a process where we will look at the water quality modelling, we will look at the current condition of the river, and then we will look at what possible measures or mechanisms are appropriate in order to reduce nutrients. It's very much centred around nutrients. The wider work that the Catchment Partnership are doing will look at the wider river health. Consequently, for the diffuse water pollution plan, the main body of the Wye, so we're talking about the special area conservation, the English part, is passing its nutrient target. It's close in places, but largely it passes. So our focus is really on the Lug, which is the main tributary coming in for those that aren't so familiar. Now, we've done some modelling already. So modelling looks at what would an intervention result in terms of nutrient reductions. We know in the Lug that there's a significant nutrient reduction from rural land use that's required. We know that Welsh Water can accommodate for their contribution under their investment programmes. So then we have to say to ourselves, okay, what interventions or measures will close that gap? And we can do that through modelling, which basically is giving you the best guess. So what is the likely reduction in nutrients of an intervention? We can only go so far because it can't do everything, but it can give us a broad spectrum. Now, what we know is that there will be a gap. So once you look at regulation, once you look at farm advice, and all the other huge amount of work in the catchment, there will be a gap. So what we'll end up with is a diffuse water pollution plan, which will have a nutrient gap. Now, the board may consider there could be an element of further research that could look at what interventions or what process could be undertaken to close that gap. And I've spoken to some other areas that are doing diffuse water pollution plans. There's 37 across England, and the gap isn't unique. So the gap is a problem, because for the Wye we're complex. We've got different soil types. We know we've got legacy P. We know that there are other unique traits about the catchment. So when we're talking about what will a DWPP do, it will provide an updated evidence base, but is likely to show that there's still an element which we don't yet have the modelling or the understanding that would take us to that SAC target, and that SAC target is very stringent. That helps.
It does. So is the implication of that then that the DWPP will be posing a question, and the research might be looked to be providing some of the answer to that question?
So what's happening at the moment, and I don't want to sort of jump ahead, but there's obviously the work with the DWPP, so the English part, and also the work which Liz is leading on with Anne and NRW. What we will then have is this combined evidence base, which basically says this is where we're at in terms of our understanding of water quality in the catchment, ignoring all the other temperature and climatic impacts. So that will feed into the process of the research, because what it does is it provides whoever does the research with the latest evidence to start that research off, to then understand what are the questions coming in and where does perhaps that could focus. And with what Gareth's outlined today, there will be a process where a stakeholder group or a subgroup, whatever that governance looks like, can feed and help shape that.
Thank you, it's very helpful. Liz?
Thanks. Yeah, I just wanted to come in on the back of what Martin's mentioned there. So I think it's really positive, isn't it? Because the DWPP is coming forward, the Welsh catchment evidence is coming forward, and that will evidence where that gap is, and feed into those projects that need to be undertaken to do the research around that. I suppose I would just like to see the projects being looked at specifically in terms of timeframes that are set at the outset and outcome based, so we're very, very specific about what we are achieving through the delivery of these projects, and where possible quantification of phosphate reduction if that's relevant to that particular project, so that then we can think about in the longer term and how we can potentially scale up these projects, if you like, to catchment scale if that's appropriate, and start to draw in private investment. One eye on the longer term.
Brilliant, thank you. So we have a lot of people who want to speak now. It's great. So I'm going to go Louise, and then Andrew, and then James, and then Simon, and then Catherine.
I think obviously the diverse water pollution plan is really welcome and really positive step. One question would be, is it based on the previous modelling using FarmScoper, where my critique of the modelling would be that it didn't seem to include as many options or as many techniques for reducing diffuse water pollution as other elements of global research have done. I know it was based on the diffuse water pollution sort of handbook solutions, but across the world we see many other solutions which haven't been, as far as I know, included in the FarmScoper modelling. And so that there is this gap. We know that even if we do all the best optimum actions, that it still won't be enough to bring the lug into favourable condition, which will impact on the Wye. So my suggestion or urging would be that the research funding is used to fund applied trials of these additional solutions that are commonplace in other parts of the world. For example, in Denmark, any watercourse more than 2 metres wide, and we're talking including ditches here, are buffered by 50 metres. Over 2 metres, the buffer's 150 metres, whereas the FarmScoper models seem to include buffers between 6 and 24 metres, as would be funded through catchment-sensitive farming options. Those options are not enough to get the river into favourable status, and I think the research should investigate the impact of trials, applied research, trialling these solutions, doing things which will change the body of the Wye, not just ask more questions. There's a huge background of research done by numerous organisations here, which we should embrace and use.
Thanks, Louise. Andrew? So we'll let this kind of gather up, Gareth, and then do feel free to respond as and when you choose. Thank you. Andrew?
The voice of the river has definitely got to go. She's just stolen all my questions and thunder. I'm an impatient person, Gareth, by nature, and having been through a major strategic review on a couple of 3 occasions of different things, can I plead that we try and avoid wordsmithing when you start to write things, and that includes everyone here. It's so easy to say, well, this word's not right, another one needs to go. We actually just need to get the plan through, and we need to have it written in a very concise and easy way. The one area where I'm pleased that you mentioned, and I'd like to reiterate what Louise has just said, I think we have an enormous amount of data. I'm not really sure that more data will bring us any different results. But where I would like to do is just emphasise the point, with new technologies coming through, that's where I think some money can be spent to say what's going to be effective, how effective is it going to be, what are the milestones for it, and what are the outcomes? Because I think we are in a fast-moving technological age, and many things that have never been tried before are the sorts of things I think we should be looking at to get the reductions and get the Wye back into favourable status. Thank you.
And James.
Thank you, Alyssa. Can I first welcome the River Champions reference to the experience of continental Europe. I haven't seen the Danish example, but I have seen the French. Go to the Jura, and the buffers are 200 metres, either side of very small ditches, and particularly the Doub River Catchment, which also has SAC lakes. Gareth, I would urge you to look at that. I can send you some pictures if you like. I was there last summer. My question is this. When we first met ministers in December, our pitch was a very simple one. We were asking ministers, Emma Hardy and DFM Iranka Davis, for the funding to deliver a catchment management plan 2025. I haven't heard that mentioned. It's not in your recent email. That worries me. We need to bring together the evidence in one place and then have a programme of measures for action that is then underpinned and reviewed, in my view, by the programme of research you've laid out. My second point relates to joining the dots, or in my old life, I would call policy integration. Since that meeting in December, since the 11th of March meeting, there have been some quite big changes. And I'm not referring to the gentleman across the Atlantic. What have we got? We've got a carbon budget has been published for Carbon Budget 7 by the Climate Change Committee. That has massive land use implications. We're going to have an LNRS, Local Nature Recovery Strategy, later this year, hopefully, that will set out the opportunity map and the priority habitat baseline for the county. We've got a land use framework at national level that is calling for 9% of agricultural land to be taken out of agriculture to other uses, carbon sequestration, nature recovery. Please, can we join the dots? I could name a few other drivers, but in terms of the big ones, I think those are they. Carbon Budget 7 and LUF at national level, and the LNRS locally. Can we join it up and then understand what that means in a spatial context for which, for the purposes today, is the catchment? It has big implications for not only the use of land, but how land is managed, and then how that shift, transformational shift, is incentivised over a timeline. And I think we're all realists here. We know that timeline is probably 25, 30 years, a generation and a bit.
Thanks, James. And Simon?
Yeah, sorry to come back. I should have mentioned this first time. By taking a catchment approach, we do have the opportunity to look at this through a different lens. And the systems mapping work that was done with the Environment Agency on the catchment found that the greatest benefit that we could have would be to restore the flows in the river system, naturalise the flows that are currently out of sync. And I'm always minded of one of the very first things I heard when I entered into this game, which is that the solution to pollution is dilution. And we take our eyes off the prize of restoring and naturalising flows in the catchment and the benefits that that would have to reducing pollution, restoring ranunculus populations, etc., etc. The phosphate levels in the river were sky high in the 1970s, 80s, and early 90s, and we didn't have problems because we had healthy beds of ranunculus and naturalised flows. We do need to take. If there's one thing that we can do strategically with this, is to look above the minutiae of the research and look at how we might actually bring the whole river back. That's my pitch for the strategic things. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Okay, and Catherine, and then Gareth, you can respond if you'd like. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, I agree with a lot of the questions and points that have been made. And in the same vein, really just bouncing back to what Martin Quine was saying, where he explained really clearly that the DWPP will be based in effect on best estimates, but will also help to identify where there's any research gaps. But what I'm not quite clear about is to what extent it will be an action plan, and whether the actions within that plan will also be based on best estimates of the potential outcomes, rather than holding on and waiting for more precise data, which will always be by its very nature best estimates once you come to action. So a bit of a roundabout question, but I found Martin's explanation so clear. I wanted the clarity on that last bit of it. Thank you.
Thanks. And just last, but by no means least, we have Martin Williams with his hand up. Martin, if you want to make the final contribution. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Well, thank you, Gareth, for coming along and giving some clarity on where you feel we might make some progress. I think it's really good that you've come to this group. I think the social change element of it is a fantastic piece that you've put in there, which peer-to-peer learning is something that farmers thrive on. They always like a chat down the pub and find out who's doing best. And I think that social change element is quite crucial to how this works and how the delivery post the 3-year term is one of the bigger outcomes, I think. I think we'll struggle perhaps in that 3-year term to find great big silver bullets of knowledge, but I think the learnings throughout it and post the 3-year term, and hopefully we can extend it, who knows, will be valuable on the agricultural side. And agriculture has come under so much pressure over the past few years in this space. It's lovely to see something helping on that front. So thank you very much.
Right, Gareth, if you want to respond to any of those points.
Sure. Thanks, Chair, and thanks everyone for those questions and feedback. That is super helpful. Hopefully this is the start of, lots of good discussions on the research and how we can use it to tackle all the problems. Just taking some of the points as they came up, I think, although the order might be slightly out of kilter. Take the point on the need that we need to have sort of specific and outcomes focused plans here, because it's such a potentially massive scope. We need to make sure that things are actionable and everyone involved can see what we're doing and when it's being done, as well as having an outcome attached to it so we can really see what the research will be delivering. So that's absolutely what I wanted to get into the plans as we start to shape those up, that outcome focused, absolutely. Also take the point that there's a huge amount of evidence already out there. So clearly it's going to be important that we understand what evidence is there and we build on it. So whether that is doing literature reviews or rapid evidence assessments, we need to get hold of all of the evidence that we have already, not least because that will help us avoid duplication and wasting time on information that already exists. So yeah, absolutely fair point. James's point on the catchment management plan funding, this sort of goes back to sort of the conversations back in September. Short answer is yeah, the catchment management plan is still part of this research and will be part of this research. So I omitted it from my recent emails, but yeah, it's still very much part of where we're trying to get to. So be assured on that. That will need to feature in the research as it's put together. And also your comments, James, on the need to get the policy integration right, and your call that we successfully join the dots. Again, this is something I'm really keen to land as we put the research together. So stuff around land use, big changes around carbon budgets, etc. Yeah, loads of stuff going on, various reviews going on internally and across government, looking at regulations, etc. There is a lot happening, as you mentioned. There will need to be a part of this research which sort of does some horizon scanning and plugs in with the relevant teams at Defra and Welsh Government to make sure that we are working alongside the relevant policy teams as the new policies shape up, so we understand what impact that will have in the catchment, and to make sure that we're not cutting across each other. It's not going to be straightforward, obviously, but yeah, that's something that we need to get in to the research. Question around, I think the question was around the extent to which the DWPP will include an action plan element. Was that right? Did I pick that up correctly? If that's the question, can I give it to Martin Quine to have a go at? If that's all right.
Yeah, and it might help answer the other question by Catherine as well. So what we'll end up with is some measures which we'll look at focusing on for the DWPP. So they are the measures which we believe where the current focus needs to be. Already mentioned the lug. So that will be one element. Now, as we said previously, there may be a wish list of things that we would like to do, but some of those are unfunded. So, for example, we have a pot of funding which we administer through Emma Whitehouse. Some of you will probably know, but that is an unlimited pot. So we may have to trial or do certain things at catchment specific levels. We may take, a small part of a sub catchment. What we will then do is, a bit like that was described by Martin and others, you could then look at what you can replicate elsewhere. So that will be one thing. In terms of the actions, so what you'll have is an action plan like we've got already, which will be combined within the nutrient management plan. Then what we will have is the concurrent piece of work which the research, once defined, will help identify. So it will help answer some of those questions perhaps we can't answer at the moment. So actually it probably sort of dovetails quite nicely. So what we'll have is a renewed focus. These are the areas we need to focus on, so specific to the lug. We'll have concurrent research, but at the same time, as mentioned with the catchment management plan, what we know is some of the impacts in the catchment and actually the downgrading of the river, some of them are climatic. So again, as we've discussed previously, feeds quite nicely into that catchment management plan work, where we'll start to look at what are the wider interventions around gravels, river temperature, habitat, and the wider things. So it should hopefully all come together at the same time. Now, what I didn't mention earlier, and I'll just mention it now because I think, Mary, you probably want to know when you said is imminent. We're aiming for June in terms of having the first draft, and we'll talk shortly a bit more around what that next bit looks like in terms of the other piece of work that's happening, which Liz is coordinating.
Thank you. Agree with all of that. Brilliant. Okay, Gareth, do you want to add anything else? We've got anything further?
No, thanks. That's all for me.
Okay.
Just to thank everyone again for the questions. And
I'm going to push you on a point only because I know that James would be cross if I don't. So the catchment management plan, can we request a timeline for that to come forward with the ability to draw down that funding so that we can commission that work and get cracking with it?
I'll need to consider that offline and come back.
Yeah, that's fine. I didn't expect a response, but just to pop it in your mind. That's great. Thank you so much for being with us today. We do appreciate it. It's been really good. It feels very positive where we are at the moment. Thank you for that, and thank you to Kat. Kat, is there anything that you want to add in?
No, I think Gareth covered it all. I mean, just to reassure me, Gareth are having weekly meetings, so the Welsh Government and Defra are now sort of fully engaged, and some of the wider policy thinking that I think James mentioned is again to reassure that I have started to bring in colleagues from sort of like our rural teams as well, just so that we're starting to make the connections. It's just there is work going on in the background. It's just it always looks like inertia for a while before big things suddenly happen out of nowhere. So yeah.
That's brilliant. So thank you both very much for your attendance at the Nutrient Management Board this afternoon. You're welcome to stay if you want, but also I understand you're busy people and you might want to go off and do something else. But thank you very much.
Thanks very much. Thanks all.
Okay, so moving on, we have the update from the Statutory Officer Group. Slide deck has been published in Agenda Supplement 1, and we have an update as well from NRW that's published in Agenda Supplement 2. Has anyone got any comments or questions arising from the Statutory Officer Group update?
I've got loads as normal, but I won't bother because I know it's a long meeting.
Okay.
So.
Andrew, did you want to? Is there anything? Oh, sorry, Andrew online. Oh, sorry, Andrew McDermott. Yeah, Councillor McDermott. You're on mute, Councillor.
Yeah, para 2, it mentioned that unpermitted poultry units, which I found, I suppose I'm being naive, but that's alarming. How many are there, and are there any remaining that you don't know about?
I'll come in, but I'm not quite sure what document we're referring to. I think when we talk about permitted and unpermitted poultry sites, from an Environment Agency perspective, and it's the same with NRW, poultry sites over 40,000 birds have an environmental permit which the Environment Agency regulate. Poultry below 40,000 birds are unregulated. They're effectively like any other livestock farm. So when they say unpermitted, it doesn't mean they're illegal. It's just the threshold that set within the legislative framework.
Thank you. Andrew, would you want to add to that for NRW?
No, but I suspect it was the slides from NRW that you were referring to, Andrew, where I do refer to the visits made to unpermitted. Yeah, so yeah, as Martin has said, there's a threshold where a permit is required, and that threshold is 40,000 birds. Anything below 40,000 birds doesn't require a permit, so it isn't required to be regulated under EPR in the same way as the bigger poultry units are.
Yeah, I understand that, and thanks for that. But if there's a sort of arbitrary deadline or line of 40,000 birds, then there would still be the cumulative effect of myriad smaller units. So have we got a handle on the scale of that activity?
So they would all require sort of planning permission to exist. They wouldn't require any permissions from us. But the wider control of agricultural pollution regulations would apply to them. So that's the legislation under which we use, and we would have details of where those farms are and the size of those farms. The farms do grow, as time goes on, they expand, and we can't always guarantee that we're ahead of that curve, and they are getting the permissions they need if they do exceed 40,000 birds. So there might be some that have grown and didn't get the permit before they grew. So that's always a risk that we try and stay on top of, but it's quite challenging.
So if I may ask a third question, do you have a handle on the cumulative impact of all these sort of unpermitted establishments?
It's a good question, and we probably don't fully have that.
Thank you. So Anne, while you're kind of on the mic there, noting your update that the latest water quality data is showing an overall improvement in the Wye since 2021, which is very welcome news. And I'd just be interested in a bit more detail around that, if you can.
So our SAC assessment report was published back in March. And you know, the SAC assessments don't just cover nutrients, they cover a wide range of different determinants. So I just tried to focus on phosphate for the purposes of this meeting. You know, I could probably, you know, we could probably run an hour or 2 hours long session if we wanted to go into, you know, all of the detail of that. And so I tried to summarize it on a single slide. So I think, you know, what's probably worth sort of highlighting is that we've got 5 water bodies on the River Wye catchment. They've all gone from failing to passing since 2021, which is really, really good news. The other headline is we have our 2 water bodies. So there's 45 water bodies in total on the Wye. So 2 have deteriorated out of those 45. And they are sort of up in the upper catchment. So that's something that we will now sort of have a bit more of a detailed look at, trying to understand what's happened, how reliable is that data that classification has been based on. So that's the kind of the upper sort of bits of the Wye. The other good news story is the most sort of the furthest downstream water body on the Wye has gone from failing to passing. So this is the water body that comes back in from over the border back into Wales. So that's now passing, which is sort of really good news. And I think, you know, as far as nutrient neutrality goes, that requirement now for nutrient neutrality on that low section of the Wye has now been removed. So that's the good news story. I've signposted you, so there is a link in the slides to the you know, more detailed set of information. And I think what I would say is, if people want more, then we can think about setting up a session where we do go through that in a little bit more detail, because it you know, there's a huge amount of data. It's not just SAC compliance, it's WFD as well. Water Framework Directive, sorry.
Wait, there's a lot of enthusiastic nodding down here, so you may just have lined yourself up for.
Yeah, and I was conscious that this was a busy agenda today, you know, because we could have taken up quite a big part of the meeting talking about it. So if that's something people...
I think it's something that I would like to understand better, because not only you know, I mean, it's good news, it's great. I need to understand what are the drivers behind that, how has it come about. It's all worthy of deeper understanding. So yeah, we'll try and sort something out for that. I think. Thank you.
There will be when we get to the point where we've got to nutrient management plans. So obviously this evidence has been used in this latest sort of evidence review to inform this work that's currently going on around the nutrient management plan. A lot of that will be sort of detailed and mapped out in the plan. So that will sort of, you know, help people understand it as well. But yeah, I can certainly look to trying to set something up.
That's great. Thanks very much. Excellent. Christine Hugh-Jones.
Hello, thanks. Anne explained that NRW doesn't really have a complete handle on the cumulative impact of the IPUs in answer to Councillor McDermott. One of the problems has been that these have grown up to an extraordinary extent, as we all know, in Powys, Herefordshire and the surrounding counties, in spite of the fact that councils are meant to be looking at the cumulative impact. And I think it's terribly important for us to think how they could look at the cumulative impact, because at the moment the only thing that is really cumulative is the contribution to the ammonia emissions, which, you know, are published under APIS figures. But unless there is some kind of direction to councils about how they can look at this, units will continue to be approved on an item by item, case by case basis. And I don't know how many of you are aware that it looks as if there is a poultry farm about to be approved in the catchment of the Lug at the moment. I mean, I think councils and NRW need to know what to do to look at cumulative impacts. It's been a gap ever since, well, ever since the history of intensive poultry farming.
Okay, thanks, Christine. Liz, want to?
Yeah, so my understanding is that Habitats Regulations Assessment will consider cumulative impact alongside individual impact of the proposal.
But how? I mean, what will they look at?
I think it would look at it in terms of the nutrient pollution, so phosphate, ammonia emissions. I think that's the two elements that we look at. Claire, I don't know if there's anything else that I've omitted there that you want to...
Right.
Sorry to interrupt, but Liz, what cumulative data will individual sites be assessed against?
So when an ecologist is looking at the impact, we will have the data around permissions granted and other live applications. So that's how we will consider it in the mix of what else is within that radius that could potentially impact upon the SAC. That's probably the extent of my knowledge, but I can go away and source some more information from the ecology team to give you a little bit more detail if that's helpful.
I think maybe it's one to go back to our regulators again on in terms of that data on the below permit level.
Okay, so can that be a takeaway? Just how are we dealing with cumulative impact of unpermitted, non-permitted intensive livestock units? Let's not just confine it to poultry.
That'd be really helpful. Christine raised a really important point there, so thank you.
Well, it may just be a planning thing. I don't know. It's just a planning thing. It's just a planning thing. Okay. Well, then we need a response from local authorities. So, Catherine, if you want to talk to your planners, so ask them how do they assess cumulative impact of intensive livestock units, and I can get the answer from Herefordshire. And
yes, so, sorry, Elisa. So the question from us is, where is the data about the full range? We don't hold the data that because if they've not required permits and they're older existing farms. I mean, I must admit it's a surprise to me to hear that NRW have that data. That would be really useful. I think for ourselves, we would not be moving away from nutrient neutrality in the current situation because there's so much uncertainty being indicated, not just in terms of the data on current activity, but also legacy P. But we do struggle sometimes when it comes to like small extensions. We wouldn't be looking to approve new IPUs, but the smaller changes are the ones that it's difficult for us to make clear judgments on. It's difficult for our planning committees. So if there is that cumulative data, I think that'll be very helpful. I'm not a planning specialist, so I hope I'm not getting this wrong, but.
All right, thanks, Catherine. I think we'll just leave that for now because what we're trying to do is go through the SOG update, which this isn't part of. So if you'll forgive me, but I think it's raised an interesting question, and we probably need to take that away and try to bottom that out. So I'm going to. There's a couple of things in the update which I'm going to respond to. Welsh Water to Cymru. Thank you for the co-delivery event in Cardiff, which was looking at ways in which Cymru can work with partners to deliver improvements for the environment and water quality. It was really, really good. I thought it was a very, really, really good event. You say in your update that AMP8 provide 13 kilograms a day removal, and that you would be able to provide data of reductions to date to the board as and when they're available. Yes, as the chair of the board, I would welcome that information as and when it becomes available, please. Question for you. you'll be aware, subsequent to the publication of the NPPF, that housing requirements have changed. The target has not quite but nearly doubled in Herefordshire. And how is that factored into the thinking of Welsh Water going forward in terms of the investment programme?
Thank you, Chair. I'm not entirely sure at the present moment. I don't sit on the developer services aspect of the company, but it's something that I can definitely find out. It's something that we will be looking at. Obviously, we have to take it case by case, as we would normally. We're the consultees for the local development plans, so we do work with all the local authorities throughout our catchment, throughout our operating area. We have to move with...
It needs to, basically it needs to sync up with the development of the local plan, which I know we'll be communicating with, but just asking where does that sit in your investment plan?
To that and adapt into it, I guess.
So, and then for Environment Agency, I really like the linked films. They're great, so I recommend to board members, if you haven't looked at the Environment Agency update and the Environment Agency Wye specific pages, it's got these very, very good. They're doing some excellent work and actually, requires a better audience. So have a look at it and appreciate them. They're very good. The remote sensing with satellite is really good, but I've also been impressed locally with the use of drone footage to look at the way water is moving through areas, and I think that's an incredibly useful tool. A response about whether or not you can think across or join up with wildlife sites or other things that maybe fall elsewhere, but I think there's a danger there that if that link isn't an automatic link, then if it's case by case, how sturdy is that, and is it possible to actually put I don't know, just make sure that consideration is always there, rather than it being something. It feels like maybe it would be sometimes and maybe not. I could be wrong.
I think it's probably more straightforward when you've got your sort of statutory conservation designations like your SSSIs. I think the local wildlife sites can be more minutiae in terms of where they are. We have got examples, and I've been involved with examples before, where you've had damage to local wildlife sites, but they do have a different level of protection, so it will really be on a case-by-case basis. But obviously, where we've got soil loss that is harming anything else, we'll liaise with Wildlife Trust, obviously Clare at National England, and so forth.
Okay, and then my final point was that I really appreciated the update on the projects, the WEEF funding, is that what we call it, WEEF funding? And then it occurred to me, I'd love more detail on those projects in terms of what they're setting out to achieve, and how are we measuring the success or delivery of the outcomes, but also nearly all of the projects. In fact, I think all of the projects were focused on in one way or another on nutrient losses, but none of the projects are in the current nutrient management plan action log, and it would be great to just get into the habit of if we know we've got a project that's doing something around nutrients, that it feeds into the plan, so that we have a one place where everything is sitting, where it's got something to do with nutrients, if that makes sense. Is that possible?
So the name WEEF, Water Environment Investment Fund, will change. Hopefully it's something a bit more translatable. But consequently, it's very much aimed at Water Framework Directive, so reasons for failure. So that's why they're often nutrient driven. They are delivered, the project is delivered as part of a partnership agreement, so they're often delivered with, as you see, the ENGOs, Wildlife Trust, etc. And I think this is where, when we get down the route of the catchment management plan and how everything fits together, I think this is where this is really important around what does an initiative update look like, what's the frequency of review, etc. So I think that's a broader question perhaps we can take offline and then work out how best to make sure that the plan is kept up to date within a proportionate period. Okay.
Thank you. I'd be interested in just bottoming that out with you at some point. And then a question for Herefordshire Council. An update on MHCLG and the Nature Fund and the wetlands and where we're at with all that.
Yeah, so we had a meeting recently with MHCLG on the Nature Restoration Fund, and that was to feed in kind of further thoughts around how that might work in practice. And we haven't yet received any update as to how that will work. I don't know if there's anything that Natural England want to add in terms of that. And just on the strategic mitigation, we have obviously trading the credits from Luston and Tarrington. I think we've released 796 houses released using the credits. We are working to acquire a third wetland site, and in discussions with a school within the Lug catchment to undertake a PTP upgrade, and those are the mitigation. That's the mitigation that is set out within the cabinet report. I have agreed that we will take it seems like a kind of timely opportunity to undertake a review of the strategic mitigation moving forward, simply because of the Nature Restoration Fund and also the change in housing numbers in Herefordshire. So I will bring that forward within the next couple of months, if that's okay.
Thank you very much. Okay, has anyone else got any questions or comments on the Statutory Officer Group update? Mary.
It's an observation going back to Liz's point about outcomes having quantifiable numbers. It's interesting that in that whole report there's loads of things happening, but only Welsh Water can give us a kilogram reduction, which means that the Nutrient Management Board can't update the plan with numbers. So if you've got projects that have been signed off and they've obviously gone through due diligence but they're going to achieve something, it surely must be possible to say, we think it's going to reduce phosphorus by X. Even if you're not exactly right, we had to do it for the wetlands, we have to do it for every planning application that comes forward. I don't think it's beyond the realms of possibility if you're getting funding to do that. It might be that we can't put it in as a delivered outcome until the project's finished and you've said, yes, it definitely did reduce by X number of kilograms, but we can't keep going with not having numbers, otherwise we'll never chip away at it.
Thanks,
it's just,
Martin.
I think, just an observation.
And I think this comes back to the challenge we've had with the nutrient management plan. The current one, if you like, in the original version is around scientific certainty. So when you've got something coming out of an end of a pipe, it's much easier to measure, and therefore you can account for reduction. Now, where you've got diffuse pollution from rural land use, it's much more challenging to put the metrics around that. That's why the projects that we fund in partnership with the, those that you'll be familiar with in the catchment, really focuses around measures to look at soil loss, which we know is a big cause of nutrients entering the river, looking at land use practice or land use change. The metric side to it is much more tricky in terms of putting a figure to that nutrient reduction. Now, if we can, we will, but I don't think we can sit here and say that, being realistic, that we're able to do that where we are now.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was just going to add, if we are taking out that requirement around the NMP delivering the housing growth and that need for scientific certainty, then I think if we can start to begin to estimate, and I say this knowing how challenging it is, so I'm not saying it putting an onus on any one organisation, but I think collectively this is something we should be starting to put estimates of reduction against wherever we can.
And just to add to that, so anybody involved with private mitigation, it is complicated, Martin, but we all have to do it in order to be able to say that's how, if I intervene in this way, it'll save me X, Y, Z amounts of nutrients. So it is possible, but it's complicated, but doing something's better than not having a number at all, given the money that's going into it and the expectation of people that things are happening. And I think it's fair to the delivery partners as well that they know they could say, I did this and I saved that.
Okay.
Whenever we can, we would absolutely agree with that. But as Martin outlined, project by project and the broader scale catchment focused approaches are harder to quantify. But I suppose coming back to Liz's point about the development of the strategic plan for Herefordshire Council to accommodate this new larger growth housing, Natural England's advice is that to do that you do need that nutrient balance, so you need that strategic approach to nutrient balance, and that would come through the local plan, not through the nutrient management action plan or the Wye Catchment plan. That would come through your forward look in terms of that strategic mitigation planning. That's where we would see that nutrient budget, like the example of Canterbury that we've shared.
Yeah,
So
so
you would get that catchment-wide nutrient balance.
understand what you're saying, that that strategic mitigation to deliver the housing growth will be set out within that local plan. I think in terms of our longer term ambition about achieving river restoration, being able, I suppose I would just re-emphasise the point, being able to analyse the projects that we're undertaking and where we are investing money, that we are delivering an outcome and starting to see the numbers come down and understand how far we are away from river restoration and what the next steps are. It's giving a structure to our piece of work, isn't it, what we're trying to achieve. So I don't think we should just put it to the housing growth needs to be quantified. I think river restoration, the work on that also needs to be quantified.
Absolutely, and the terms of reference of this group clearly states our ambition is to achieve favourable conservation status, so any evidence we can gather to what difference the work we are doing is making to that is absolutely clear. When it comes to the housing development part, that would be in the local plan strategic mitigation and nutrient balance.
Okay, thank you. Got Andrew and then Martin Williams.
Thank you, Chair. Perhaps a naive question, but given the fact that you have got to build potentially another 10,000 houses within the terms of the plan, can I ask a naive question, which is investment in wetlands the best return for money? Or is it the only return that you can currently get to extract, have phosphate savings? Because it strikes me as being incredibly expensive.
So I think at the point in time where we undertook to develop the wetlands, that was the only mechanism that was coming forward. And I think that's why, since, as we've got to this point, we are looking across the country and seeing what other mechanisms are coming forward. It's, there are other options. Some are less palatable, perhaps. That's something that can be put into that review, and then, that will be shared and a kind of decision taken by Cabinet, I would imagine. Yeah.
Thank you. Martin.
Thank you. We sit in this room on a single point issue, and we've heard from Gareth about the research process that's going on around the soils. We can sit here and pontificate around bits and pieces, and it seems like you're going over old ground. I've sat here for 4 years now, and I've heard the similar conversations. So, as Andrew has just said, the council are going to come under severe pressure to meet housing targets. They're going to come under severe pressure to meet nutrient targets. You're going to come under severe pressure on all different fronts. And previous to now that Gareth's presented to us, there has been very little data around improvement through any biodiversity scheme. None at all. And there are people within that room responsible for those schemes. So when we're asking now for some style of measurement, it's very difficult to preempt that measurement before that research happens. And so I would urge you to support Gareth in his quest, and perhaps some of those answers will become more available as time goes on, because they will need to fit into the council's very difficult position, where in other rooms they're talking about how we build 27,000 houses. So we've got to remember we're sitting in one room here, and it's part of a bigger picture.
Thanks, Martin. Okay, any more on this item? No? Okay, thank you. And moving on to, I mean, there's a short update within the Statutory Officer Group update reports, but is there anything further to add on the diffuse water pollution plan, Martin?
Not outside of what I've covered already, unless anyone's got any further questions on that.
Okay, a question from Mary and then one from Richard.
I just wanted to highlight that when you were talking about the DWPP, it's all very clear, but we need to remember as well that it was a High Court judgment from 2015, and that is legally bound to deliver actions to secure favourable conditions within the catchment. It's not, here's a bit of research, this is what we think might work, we might do a bit of this. Legally, it has to be a plan that recovers the catchment. And I think that then gets us out of the question about neutrality. So as soon as you've got a plan that secures your catchment recovery, and hopefully favourable conditions, not just the plan to get to favourable conditions, then all of our other questions kind of fall slightly to the side. But it is a legally required plan for the lug that was asked to be produced in 2015.
So look, I'm no legal expert, but a DWPP is a non-statutory plan. The DWPP came as a result of the consent order for the 2015 judicial review. The plan which is being produced as a result, some may say, it's taken quite a long time, but consequently, the status of the plan is a non-legal plan. So it's not quite how you articulate.
So is it a legal requirement to have the plan, but not a legal requirement to deliver the plan? I don't know the answer.
So you're probably stretching my experience,
I don't know
but
either.
what the plan is in response to the consent order that came from the judicial review. The plan is not a statutory document that's required from law, so it has no legal weighting like other statutory plans that you may see within local council.
But I think it's legally required to be a plan that works.
So we have to meet the consent order requirements. Now that isn't actually producing a plan that will resolve meet the favourable condition, the target. What it is, it provides an update to the current evidence, and we look at what measures we could put in place in order to meet that target. Now, what we've spoken about already is the gap, because with all the will in the world, we could have a plan with a gap, which is what we're going to have, and we need to try and fill that gap. So consequently, we can't pull out something that is going to close that gap if we don't know what that gap is. And I think this is why the conversation around the research is where the research could consider some of the opportunities to close that gap. So in terms of that plan, it will be a non-statutory plan. They aren't published; they're made publicly available, and then that plan will provide an update to the current evidence. It won't provide all the solutions to close the gap, as we've spoken about already.
Okay, thank you, Richard. And okay, James.
Yes, I'm almost fixated on this gap from memory. And Martin, please correct me if I'm wrong, because the draft plan has moved on, I'm sure. From memory, I read somewhere that it was likely to say, even if all farmers in the catchment complied fully with the farming rules for water and took up every available agri-environment incentive, there'd still be a 60% shortfall against target. Now, if that's the case, and that is what the gap is come the end of June, my question is, so if that's the gap, where's the money coming from? Yes, let's have the research. I love the idea of linking it to what Gareth was talking with us about earlier. But fundamentally for me, this is about matching the gap to the incentives available to help farmers make the transition. So once we've got that plan, we're going to have a collaborative approach back to Defra off the back of what the Corrie Review has just said. The Corrie Review recommendation 8 says use LNRS as one of the targeting tools. The DWPP will be another. So we actually need to make a pitch to Defra so that Claire and her cohorts can use this evidence to actually target where the advisory effort is going and where the incentive effort is going, rather than, in the chair's words, spaffing it everywhere. It has to be. I mean, Martin, have I got that wrong, or am I broadly in the right place?
So we don't want to probably go down a rabbit hole of modelling, but in terms of the modelling, and we've heard from Louise already around the different models. There's many different models, and each model will probably say a different scenario, a different thing, or they're modelled different variables. If we do look at farm scope, which is the model we use, and if we look at the most realistic model, James is correct in terms of 100% regulatory compliance, implementation of all voluntary agreements, you probably model around 15% in terms of reductions. So I think this is where, once we've got the updated evidence, we can then think about what we do next.
It just seems very much that there's an order of events here, and getting the plan out so that we have a shared understanding of that, and then indeed moving the conversation on to how do we address that, and where do we go for funding, and how does that look, and all the rest of it. Completely correct. So that's very helpful. Thank you, Richard.
Yeah, sorry, I wanted to just return to the process and how you see it elaborating, sort of timescales, looking at June for a draft. What happens after that?
And I think we're coming on to this in the agenda items shortly. So what we'll end up having is we'll have the work, which Liz will cover in a second, around the Welsh evidence. That's happening on the other side of the border. We know Wye River. We'll have the DWP evidence, and then we will look at how we merge those into what will be the nutrient management plan, and then, a bit like James articulated, once we've got that, we can then understand how everything dovetails together. So it feels like it perhaps could come out all at the right time, but perhaps it may be worth moving on to where we are with the others.
Could you be a bit more specific?
Yeah, so unusually, as we know, in terms of the why, the scenarios which many colleagues across the country are dealing with is a non-cross-border river. So therefore, many of them don't have existing nutrient management plans. So effectively, you're starting at zero. So you've not got something that came before. Then you don't have the difference between England and Wales. Now we do have one example on the D. So the D have got similar here nutrient management plan, and they've also got a DWPP. And really, where I think we'll understand as we progress the conversations is where does the nutrient management plan sit in the context of the updated evidence? So we've got a DWPP, a Welsh evidence. So that will feed into a wider plan, then that will feed or sit inside the catchment management plan. That bit I think we need to unpick, because otherwise what we have the risk of, and we've said this from the beginning, is we end up with an English update to the evidence, which then doesn't consider Wales. And the reason why, with Herefordshire Council's support through the Welsh Government funding, the Welsh side is looked at is because then you have a full situational update of the entire catchment. Then from that, we then would look at what are the key recommendations. We understand where potential gaps are. So once we get to June, what we'll have is the updated evidence, if you like. We won't have a full plan because that will come after.
Forgive me, maybe it needs just to understand the Welsh dimension first, but what I'm looking for is some form of timetable for when this thing might be agreed and there to be put into action.
So by June we'll have a plan for the English part of the Wye. We can discuss the Welsh part in a second. I don't want to speak on behalf of colleagues. Then what we'll then do is we'll then look at how the updated evidence sits within the context of what is the current nutrient management plan. But it may be worth me deferring to.
Yeah, let's talk about the Welsh bit, and then hopefully we've covered everything. So yeah.
So I'm going to quickly move to Anne, who's going to provide the update on the Welsh evidence.
Okay, thanks, Liz. So the evidence review for the Welsh side of the Wye has been completed by the consultants that were procured through Herefordshire Council using the Welsh Government funding. So that initial report is now with us. This is the evidence review. We're looking at that now, and we'll try and turn that around as quickly as we can. The mitigation measures that will then follow on the back of that review of that evidence that's sitting with us. So again, timescale wise, we can't keep sort of the consultants on the books for indefinitely. So we would like to have a sort of an end date on that, as much as I'm sure Herefordshire Council would as well. So I think June is being talked about as being the likely kind of sort of time when we will hopefully have something by way of mitigation measures based on what the evidence review for the Welsh evidence is saying. So, if we can tie it in with the DWPP timescale, then that would be brilliant. As Martin alluded to, we have got a piece of work to do here then, just to sort of figure out how we produce a single document and a single plan that covers the whole Wye. So we are sort of going to be sort of bolting some English and Welsh information together. So that is a piece of work that we'll need to do.
So just to follow on from that then, Richard, we are doing the piece of work behind the scenes. So that is EA, NRW and the various councils that in Wales. So we are picking that up, and we will provide a kind of overview of timescales and engagement around that wider piece. Okay.
When would we?
So I just need to so I have drafted it, and I have shared it with colleagues, but we just need to get that signed off and approved, and then we can share that.
But we're talking fairly soon.
I would anticipate, yes, because obviously our overarching ambition is to get this done by June, so we will certainly share it with you before that.
And just to finally add, though, that there's something very sort of sensible and logical about as these two pieces of work come together and start to form the nutrient management plan, then that is the document upon which, as the nutrient management board, we would wish to be cited. So as soon as there's a sort of clarity of timelines around that, I think we would appreciate that going forward, so that we can factor it into agendas and so forth. That would be great. Thank you. So that's skipped over a whole bunch of different agenda items in one fell swoop. I love that. It's brilliant. We're going to get home for tea in a minute. Okay. So wider updates from members of the board. Very grateful to Andrew McRaw for a very excellent update from CPRE and the excellent work that they're doing. Very interested in the way in which the Environment Agency are working positively with citizen science. I think there's a lot of potential around this, but it's bit by bit, slowly, gently. But it's great that we're starting to see that move ahead. And the hedgerow, being involved in planting on these hedgerows, I've got to say, it's a great thing to do. If you've got some spare time, go plant a hedgerow. It's a really positive way of spending time. Andrew.
Can I just say thanks to the EA who provided us with 10 people to plant on one of the sites, and can I just embarrass Herefordshire Council, because my understanding is that all your staff have 2 days charity freedom, and we haven't had one person come and help plant the hedgerows. So take a bow, EA, and embarrass Herefordshire Council. Now, we are starting next year's shortly, so please can you emphasise that we would like some volunteers to plant hedgerows. And any other company that's involved here, I don't know, will the Welsh Water have abilities? I expect they do. Good. So, because we've got an even bigger target. It's the 100th anniversary of CPRE, and we're hoping to have completed 100 miles of hedgerow.
Can I just say, hedges do have a quantifiable phosphorus reduction number, so you could work out how much phosphorus you've saved by planting hedges. I'll get my calculator out. It's very complicated, I know. I will make sure I do it properly and let you all know.
That's brilliant. So do we have any other reports, verbal reports from board members on the call or in the room? No? Okay. Oh, Andrew, again.
Can I just, I forgot to mention one thing, and I know that we've got some farmers in the room here, or in a room somewhere, to say that we worked with 9 farmers to plant our hedgerows, and we will be looking for more land, more farmers for the next planting season. So I'd just like to publicise that, you know, get in touch.
Can we have a shout out to our INFU members and farming members if they know of anyone who's looking for some hedgerow planting?
Yes, of course.
Brilliant, thank you. Okay, so any other business? I don't have anything. Has anyone got anything further? No? All right, next scheduled meeting is Wednesday the 16th of July at 2 p.m. And all that remains is me to ask for the live stream to